In times of universal deceit, truth is the only rebellion left. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Everett Piper, and this is The Rebellion. Today's topic is going to be education again and school choice. And I'm going to deal with this argument. I'm going to respond to this concern that's coming out of conservatives, and I might even want to put conservatives in air quotes, because I do believe that a lot of conservative leaders out there are misguided. They haven't informed themselves, they haven't educated themselves enough to understand what school choice really is and why we should be standing for it rather than being against it or maybe even neutral. What's the context? Well, here in Oklahoma, as you know, our state attorney general, Gentner Drummond, is suing to stop parents from choosing to send their kids to a board-approved charter school called St. Isidore's here in Oklahoma. Now, what do I mean by that? The board that approves charter schools in Oklahoma has already ruled in favor. They've already received the application, they've reviewed the credentials, and they've given St. Isidore's a thumbs up that it could be and will be and can be one of our charter schools that's available to students and parents here in Oklahoma if they choose to send their kids to that school. Gentner Drummond is saying, no, you can't do that. Why? Well, as I've said on previous programs, previous episodes of The Rebellion, he's arguing that this is a violation of the separation of church and state, that it's a breach of the wall that separates the church from the state and the state from the church. Now, I'm going to deal with that again after we take a break. I'm going to refresh your memory, remind you what this wall of separation really was in the mind of Thomas Jefferson when he coined that phrase. And then I'm going to respond to the concern that conservatives, Gentner Drummond fancies himself as one, I believe, at least that's the way he's campaigning for governor right now, as well as Linda Murphy and others within the state of Oklahoma. And if you don't live here, don't get distracted by the state of Oklahoma or the names of Gentner Drummond or Linda Murphy. Frankly, if you don't live here, that's irrelevant because the same argument is taking place in your state right now that you should not be able to send your kids to a private school or a charter school if it has a religious philosophy, the premise of a Judeo-Christian worldview, which St. Isidore's does because it's a parochial school. It's a Catholic school. It's chartered, yes. It's approved by the board here in the state of Oklahoma, yes, but it is a Catholic school. Gentner Drummond is arguing that because of the wall of separation in church and state, you should not be able to avail yourself of that particular charter school because you're going to be using tax dollars to send your kids to a religious institution, thus the separation, the breaching of the wall of church and state. Make sense? Well, there's an ongoing concern, and I've heard many conservatives ask this question, or perhaps even beat this drum. Well, if you allow those tax dollars to go to St. Isidore's, then what's to stop a Muslim school, a Satanist school, a Buddhist school, a Hindu school, a Mormon school? Fill in the blank. What's to stop your tax dollars from funding those types of institutions too? Therefore, rather than opening up Pandora's box and allowing your tax dollars to be used at St. Isidore's, let's just shut the door, stop it all, and therefore we'll protect ourselves from tax dollars funding a Sharia school, i.e. a Muslim school, or some other school that you disagree with religiously. Is this a valid argument, and should conservatives be concerned with this? I'll answer that question after we take a break. Remember that our sponsor here for the Rebellion is equippingthepersecuted.org. That's equippingthepersecuted.org. This is a ministry that serves our persecuted brothers and sisters in Nigeria. And as I've said before, over 90% of the persecution that we're aware of right now that takes place around the world against Christians takes place in the country of Nigeria. In other words, this is a hellhole for our brothers and sisters in Christ to live in. They're being robbed of their homes. Their children are being taken from them. They're being maimed, they're being raped, they're being pillaged, they're being killed simply for being Christians. Equipping the Persecuted goes into these communities and provides food and supplies, orphanages and schools and hospitals. They also do one additional thing that I'm not aware any other of these types of organizations do, and that is they go into these towns and villages and teach these people how to secure their homes, secure their communities, provide safety measures that hopefully will stop the persecution before it starts in the first place. If you want to help our brothers and sisters in Christ who are suffering greatly for their faith, if you want to give them food and supplies and schools and orphanages, if you want to help them with their health care, hospitals and doctors and whatnot, and if you want your money to go to teach them how to secure their villages, how to have safety measures in place so that the persecution stops and doesn't ever happen in the first place, then give your money, a tax-deductible gift, to equippingthepersecuted.org. Go online right now, equippingthepersecuted.org, and make a gift today. All right, back to the show. You know, in a previous episode, that I talked about this case of St. Isidore's versus Drummond here in the state of Oklahoma that has reached the United States Supreme Court. They've already heard the case. They'll be ruling on it in the weeks ahead. This case is essentially a Republican attorney general who is running for the governor's role, I might add right now. He's already announced that he is seeking the Republican nomination for the governor of the state of Oklahoma because our current governor is terming out. Governor Kevin Stitt, a Republican who has served the maximum number of terms that he can serve here in the state of Oklahoma, and Gentner Drummond, the attorney general, is running to replace him as a Republican. And Mr. Drummond is suing to deny Oklahoma parents the right to choose to send their children to a board-approved charter school, St. Isidore's, with a 100% graduation rate and a 98% matriculation rate to college. In other words, 100% of these kids that go to St. Isidore's graduate. They know how to read, they know how to write, they know how to count, they understand American civics. In other words, America is exceptional and not evil. And they understand the basics of biology and science, that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. They're actually taught these things at St. Isidore's, and they perform exceptionally on all standardized tests, to the extent that 98% of these graduates from St. Isidore's actually matriculate to college. Now, if you live in a marginalized community in Tulsa or Oklahoma City, or out in the hinterlands of Oklahoma, in an oil patch town that doesn't have a decent school or school system, and you found out that St. Isidore's is now approved by our Oklahoma Charter Board, you'd want to at least consider sending your kid to St. Isidore's, wouldn't you? Because it's a better education. It's in every way, it's a better education. Even if you're not Catholic, you might want to send your kid there, right? I would. I would. And I'm assuming many of you listening right now would too. Gentner Drummond is saying, no, you should not have the opportunity or the choice to do so because you can't use government money to fund a religious organization, i.e., a religious school. St. Isidore's is Catholic. Let me correct a couple things here. First of all, stop saying government money. If you're conservative in any way whatsoever, if you have one conservative drop of blood in you, stop saying government money. Stop saying tax dollars. These are your dollars. The money wouldn't exist if it didn't come from you. And conservatives shouldn't buy the argument that government money exists. Government money does not exist. It's your money. It's my money. The only place that Oklahoma gets its money from is you and me. We're paying our ad valorem tax, our property tax. We're paying our sales taxes. We're paying our income tax. We're paying our taxes. In other words, we contribute our money to the coffers of the state of Oklahoma, and then we elect individuals to use our money and distribute our money in a manner that we see fit. That's what's called taxation with representation. You get it? We agree to be taxed. We don't rebel. We don't start a civil war. We don't refuse to pay those taxes. We don't sit on our front porch with guns loaded and telling the tax collector to stay off our property or we'll blow his head off. We don't do that in Oklahoma. We agree to pay our taxes because we have representation. Do you follow me? We say, here's our money for our schools, for our roads. Here's our money. to pay the salaries of the governor, of the attorney general, of the representatives in our given area, and our state senators. Here's our money. We have elected you to represent us in terms of setting a budget and distributing that money accordingly. It's our money. Now do with it in a manner that we see fit. And if we don't think you're doing so, we'll fire you. We won't elect you again. We'll get somebody who will listen to us. This philosophy of taxation with representation, this philosophy has something implicit, something endemic to it. And that is, it's not the government's money. Because if it were the government's money, they don't need to represent us. They can do anything they see fit. The government can say to us, to you, to me, go pound sand. We don't care what you think. Because it was never your money in the first place, and it certainly isn't your money now. It's the government's money. It's Oklahoma's money. It's Oklahoma City's money, the capital of Oklahoma. We will spend it. We don't care what you say. Your representative voice is moot to us. We do not hear you. Well, that's not the United States of America. That's not constitutional nationwide, and it's not constitutional here in Oklahoma. Taxation with representation. So stop saying government money. If I hear one more conservative, one more Republican talk about tax money and government money, I'm going to strangle you. I'm going to scream, because you need to stop parroting that ACLU talking point. Okay, that's a progressive liberal talking point. They've brainwashed you into using their language, their nomenclature, their labels for money. It's your money. It's not government money. It's not tax money. It's your money. And you have representation in how it's spent. That's point number one that I want to make. Point number two, as I've said before, this wall of separation that Gentner Drummond is referring to, and Linda Murphy and others have bought into, is false. It's a false narrative. It's a misunderstanding at best, or perhaps even an intentional obfuscation. It's not historically valid to describe it as a wall that keeps the church out of the government. That is not what Thomas Jefferson intended. He made that very clear, as I've said before, in his letter to the Baptist Church, to the Baptists in Danbury, Connecticut, back in 1802, some 11 years after James Madison wrote the First Amendment, which says, at least in part, that Congress doesn't talk about your state legislature. It says Congress. It's referring to the federal Congress shall make no law establishing religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's all it says. That it's none of Congress's business to establish religion for you. The government, the king, can't come in and say, you've got to go to this church. Congress does not have that right. We have no king that tells us to do those things. The context of that First Amendment, when it was written, was that we were rebelling against the United Kingdom, against Great Britain, and its king, who was trying to tell the colonies where to go to church. And the First Amendment by James Madison said, stop it. You can't tell us where to go to church any longer. Our Congress here in the United States of America cannot establish a religion, cannot force a religion upon us. We have freedom of religion here in the United States. You cannot establish religion for us. We will establish it ourselves, for our children, for our home, and for our communities. And I say for our communities intentionally here, because nothing in the First Amendment says that your community can't acknowledge a given philosophical, religious foundation. There's nothing in this Constitution or the Bill of Rights that says that. That's point number one. Point number two. When Jefferson came in, like I said, 11 years after James Madison wrote the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights, Jefferson was the newly elected third president of the United States of America at the time. And there were some Baptists in Connecticut that were nervous about federal overreach, government overreach, the government getting back into the business of the church, trying to micromanage and tell the church what to do. And Thomas Jefferson wrote them a letter and said, don't worry about it. This is the Piper paraphrase, but go read it, read the history on this, and you'll recognize that my paraphrase is very accurate. It's very accurate. It's much more accurate than what Gentner Drummond is arguing, what Linda Murphy is arguing, and what those who are buying their, and I'm going to say it, lie, whether it's an intentional lie or whether it's just a lie because of ignorance, I don't know. But those that are buying the lie that somehow the church can't express itself in the public square, in government, that the wall of separation was constructed to keep the church out of government, that government has to be secular, that there can be no religious expression, there can be no religious choice within the halls of Congress, within the halls of your public services, whether they be federal or whether they be local. That's a lie. That's not what Jefferson intended. The wall of separation was clearly this metaphor, this analogy that Jefferson used to put the minds of the Danbury Baptists in Connecticut to rest. This wall of separation that he described was to tell you that the government can't get into the business of the church. There's a wall protecting the church from the government. He did not intend, nor did he say that that wall was to protect the government from the church. Do you see the difference? I've said it before, I'm saying it again, because I want you all to understand. There's a huge difference between a wall that protects the church from the government and a wall that protects the government from the church. And Jefferson clearly intended the first, that the wall protects the church from the government. He did not intend for that analogy, that metaphor, to imply that the wall protected the government from the church. Did not intend that. How do I know that? Because he also said, and this is almost a verbatim quote. I'm not reading right now, I'm going by memory, but it's pretty darn close to verbatim. He said, I, as your chief magistrate, okay, he was just elected president of the United States. So what is a synonym for chief magistrate? President. I, as your chief magistrate, as your president, I, as the president of America, the United States of America, am bound to give Christianity sanction. Okay? He said that. He prefaced that by saying Christianity is the best religion ever given to man. So he was saying that you can compare Christianity in the market square of ideas. You can compare it to Islam. You can compare it to Hinduism, Buddhism. You can compare it to secularism, atheism. You can compare it to any other worldview. And Jefferson was saying, I have done my reading. I've done my research. And Christianity is the best religion given to man. And I, as your chief magistrate, am bound to give it, what is it? Christianity. I am bound to give it sanction. Now, does that sound like Jefferson believed that Christianity should be expunged from the public square, from government, from either local government, state government, or federal government? Did it sound like Jefferson intended that? No, it did not. He just said that he, as the president, was bound to and intended to and was going to give Christianity sanction, that it would have a preferred place in his governmental philosophy. Does that mean that Jefferson was a born-again evangelical? I don't know. And for the sake of this show and for the sake of this argument, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson or James Madison or George Washington or Thomas Paine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they were born again. It doesn't matter if they were of your denominational stripe. It doesn't matter. Because what he was saying is that within my philosophy of Christianity, I find it to be superior to other philosophies that are lacking. And therefore, I'm going to give the Christian philosophy sanction. I will be employing it. I will be using it on a daily basis, a minute by minute basis in my governmental decisions. I'm giving it sanction. All right. I don't want to beat this horse to death. I've gone around the barn a few times on the separation of church and state. Sidebar, I've been challenged on Facebook for saying what I just said. Linda Murphy has challenged me, and she's been disparaging about a gentleman by the name of David Barton of Wall Builders. David Barton is a conservative Republican. He's a constitutionalist, and he's an historian. Linda Murphy is not. She does not have an education in history. She does not have the track record, the publishing record that David Barton has in history. Now, she looks down her nose at him and she claims that Oklahomans are being duped. We're being fooled. That we're foolish for agreeing with David Barton's conservative view of the founding of the United States of America. You can go read David Barton for yourself, see if you agree with what he says. He argues, like many others have argued, he's not the only one. So I would that the United States was founded explicitly within a Christian worldview. John Adams would agree with that, I guess, because he said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. You have heard me. You have read some of my other articles where I've cited dozens of quotes from George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover, Justice Brewer in the early 1900s, Dwight D. Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan. I've cited all of these people. All of these people, all of these leaders, all of these former presidents, all of these former legislators and senators and Supreme Court justices. I've cited all of them. They're quotes. And my response to somebody like Linda Murphy or anybody else who says, well, you must be getting your history from David Barton, is stop talking about David Barton. And I don't mean that disparagingly at all about David Barton. What I mean is this: I'm not the one who brought him up. Linda Murphy is. Why do you have this strange fixation on David Barton? Why can't you confront these ideas and read these quotes without bringing up David Barton? I'm not the one who cares about David Barton in this debate. So stop bringing him up. This is a Socratic fallacy. I get so frustrated with some of my fellow conservatives who can't think logically, can't make an argument logically and coherently. This is a straw man fallacy to bring up the boogeyman of David Barton and then flail away at this scarecrow because he's easy to knock down because you've crafted this defenseless image of this argument and you've put David Barton as the label on this defenseless scarecrow and you're flailing away till the straw flies to the wind and you are victorious because you beat David Barton. That's crazy. That's a Socratic fallacy at the very most elementary level. Stop it. Just stop it. Respond to George Washington. Respond to John Adams. Respond to James Madison. Respond to Thomas Jefferson's multiple quotes on this issue. Respond to the Supreme Court Justice Brewer, who said, we are a Christian nation. It's irrefutable. Respond to Dwight D. Eisenhower and Teddy Roosevelt. Respond to Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover. Respond to Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy. Respond to these quotes where people repeatedly acknowledge the fact that, at least philosophically, and there's a difference between making a philosophical argument for Christianity in the public square and a salvific argument for Christianity in the public square. A salvific argument would be one that argues that if you want to be saved, if you want to be part of the body of Christ, if you want to be born again, if you want to go to heaven rather than hell, then you have to consider the Bible's message of salvation, that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father but by him. That's a salvific view on Christianity, one that I embrace, and I will argue till the cows come home, but I will do so in the public square. And even if you don't agree, with the salvific message of Christianity, there is a philosophical premise to Christianity that sets the very cornerstones for the United States of America. And John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and virtually everybody that followed them up until 5 minutes ago in terms of human history agreed that the philosophical underpinnings were incredibly important. And if you take those underpinnings out, if you start ignoring that, you're going to create a vacuum. And that vacuum will suck into the void, the very destruction of the country that we now enjoy. Should I be able to say that as a public school teacher? Should I be able to teach that as a public school teacher? Should you be able to choose a school that I'm the administrator of or a teacher within, knowing that that's the philosophy of the school, of my classroom, that will be included in my syllabus? Or should there be a separation of church and state that stops me from teaching it and saying it as an educator and stops you from choosing it and sending your kids to that school with your money? The money that you have given to the state via your taxes, and you, expect to be represented accordingly. That's an argument that we're making right now. Now, I said that one of the things I want to respond to is this concern, and I understand it. I've had good people Facebook me or private message me or text me or send me emails saying, well, if we, Gentner Drummond and Linda Murphy are both arguing that if we allow parents to send their kids to St. Isidore's using government money, okay, stop saying it, but that's what Linda Murphy and Gentner Drummond are saying, and others. If we allow government money to be used at St. Isidore's, then we're going to have to allow the same government money to be used at any other school of choice. And what happens if that school's a Muslim school and they teach Sharia law? Do you really want that to happen? Or what happens if somebody founds a Satanist school in your backyard? Do you want your kids to be able to go to that school? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Well, let me say something here. First of all, the school has to be approved by the board in Oklahoma that approves charter schools. Don't forget that St. Isidore's was approved, that the board that reviews applications for charter schools has to approve them before they can be categorized and labeled and recognized as an official charter school within the state of Oklahoma. So those schools have to demonstrate some financial viability. They have to demonstrate that there's an enrollment base. They have to show what they're teaching. They have to show that they're going to measure that teaching and the student performance thereof, and that the students are actually learning something. During that application process and that subsequent approval process or disapproval process by the board here in Oklahoma, don't you think that that board is going to know that a Sharia school, for example, would be teaching things that are antithetical to the very Constitution of the United States of America, that they're teaching their students to participate in insurrection against the very state and the very nation that they're approving, that is approving of this educational option? Now, I would say that's a suicidal decision. No state, no board, no local government state government or federal government that's worth its salt is going to start throwing government money at a program that undermines the government, undermines the existence of that government, of that state, of that nation, of that community. That would be insane. That would be suicidal. So I would argue that if the school is teaching anything that calls for the destruction of the very country, community, town, village, state in which that school exists, if the school is admitting and saying, we're going to teach a philosophy that calls for the destruction of Oklahoma, the destruction of America, then I would argue the board shouldn't approve that school. Okay? Now, if it's a Muslim school that doesn't teach Sharia law, and they've shown that they're actually in favor of our Constitution, ironically enough, they might be teaching it a better and more respectful view of the Constitution than your local public schools, because you know as well as I do that you've got a lot of teachers and a lot of public schools that are disparaging of the United States of America. They're teaching the 1619 Project. They're teaching that America is evil rather than exceptional. They're teaching that our Constitution is bad and needs to be deconstructed and something else needs to replace it. They're getting all of this stuff in your public schools right now. So if you've got a Muslim school that doesn't teach that and actually says, well, we think the Constitution is giving us more religious freedom rather than less, and we think it's a good thing, and here's why. Or if you've got a Mormon school that teaches that, or a Buddhist school that teaches that, or a Hindu school that teaches that, or a Jewish school that teaches that, or a Quaker school that teaches that, or a Baptist or Assembly of God or a Catholic school that teaches those good things about our constitutional republic, I say bring it on. What are you afraid of? If you're a Christian and you're afraid of that, you think, oh, my land, Piper just advocated starting up Muslim schools. No, I did not. What I said is I believe in the power of a biblical worldview. I believe in Christianity. I believe in truth with a capital T. I believe that my worldview will win. Frankly, I have confidence in a Judeo-Christian ethic, a biblical worldview. Muslims, bring it on. Buddhists, bring it on. Hindus, bring it on. Bring it on. I trust the truth to win in a good, robust, free exchange of ideas. I'm not afraid of that. And I would argue you shouldn't be either. What about a Satanist school? Are you really arguing that a Satanist school should be chartered within the state of Oklahoma? No, I'm not arguing that. Again, the board that approves charter school applications should be reviewing those applicants. And again, if they're teaching garbage, and if they're admitting it as the very premise to their charter, which they have to specify, they've got to write up a charter, and that charter has to be approved. And if the charter says, we're going to teach kids how to read and how to write and how to count, we're going to teach them that our Constitution is good and not bad, that America is exceptional, not evil. We're going to teach them real biology. We're not going to allow them to be indoctrinated and brainwashed with this 57 different genders nonsense. If that school is not Christian and it's teaching that, again, I believe in the power of Christianity, the power of the truth with a capital T to win in the market square of ideas. I am not afraid of aberrant views. I don't think they're going to win. Here's the thing. If you really buy Gentner Drummond's argument, I was going to say lie. Again, I don't know whether there's intentional deception or whether Gentner Drummond and Linda Murphy and the crowd has just, maybe they've just been drinking the ACLU Kool-Aid for so long that they don't even recognize it. I don't know. But if you're going to buy the lie that religion must be expunged from the public square, otherwise you've opened up Pandora's box. You've opened up the floodgates, and you're going to have Sharia schools and Satanist schools, and you're going to have crazy crackpot cults all across the hinterlands of Oklahoma opening up private schools, charter schools, and your tax dollars are going to be funding that. If you're really buying that lie, you're ignoring, number one, the fact that their charter schools have to be approved. Okay, their charter has to be reviewed within the standards of the application. If their charter doesn't meet those standards, then they're not going to get approved. Number two, if they are approved because the charter met the standards of the state of Oklahoma, which St. Isidore's did, just because they're Catholic, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not Catholic. I'm not afraid of a Catholic institution being chartered, and I don't know why Linda Murphy is. She has said some peculiar things that are very anti-Catholic. The Supreme Court, for example, is loaded up with a bunch of Catholics, and we're in danger of them voting for government money to support parochial schools and Catholic indoctrination. It's not indoctrination. You're choosing to send your kids there. Nobody's forcing you to send your kids to any institution. It's school choice. It's not government indoctrination. There's a huge difference here. Stop talking about indoctrination when it's parents' choice to send their kids to a school that's going to teach their students, their kids, their children better than the other options in their community. It's not indoctrination. It's choice. I'm not afraid of competing against a school that has a different religious philosophy than my own. I believe mine will win. And finally, recognize that if Gintner Drummond and Linda Murphy and others are arguing that, well, you're going to open up Pandora's box, that box was opened 80 years ago. Did you know that? The GI Bill back in the 1940s and Title IV funding that has come subsequent to it for the last 80 years has allowed you, the parents, to choose which college you send your kids to. It has done that. It has allowed you to use your Pell Grant or your SEOG. Various different state grants, and I don't even like using that language, state grants, because once again, the state didn't come up with the money. Oklahoma didn't come up with the money, nor did the Congress of the United States come up with the money. The money comes from you. And Title IV, GI Bill, etc., Pell Grants, SEOG loans, all of these have presupposed and been predicated upon the student choosing or the parent choosing which school they want to go to. And using that Pell Grant, SEOG, to go to that school. And guess what? Religious schools have been permissible. Notre Dame has been getting those Pell Grants and those SEOGs for decades. Brigham Young has been getting those Pell Grants and SEOGs for decades. Oral Roberts University has been getting those Pell Grants and those SEOGs for decades. John Brown University, Southern NAS University, Mid-American NAS University, Taylor University, Wheaton College, Westmont, Azusa, Seattle Pacific, Greenville, Mid-America Christian, Central Christian, Eastern Nazarene University, Olivet Nazarene University, Northwest Nazarene University, Point Loma, California Baptist. The list goes on, people. All of these institutions allow their students to use their Pell Grants and their SEOGs to pay their bill. And this has been going on for 70 and 80 years. At Oklahoma Wesleyan, when I was president there, over 80% of our students paid their bills through Pell Grants and SEOGs and other like sources. Did the world fall apart? Because we allowed tax money. We allowed tax money to be used at Oklahoma Wesleyan University for a student to pay their bill with a Pell Grant? Or at Oral Roberts University? Or at Notre Dame? No. But what will happen, I'm going to wrap it up here. What will happen, and I would argue Gintner Drummond knows this, whether Linda Murphy does or not, I don't know. But I would argue Gentner Drummond does know this. If his argument prevails, and the Supreme Court actually says, no, you cannot use those tax dollars at a Catholic school like St. Isidore's. Oh, yeah, that's a high school. All right. I guess it's elementary, junior high, and high school. I think it covers all grades. Doesn't matter. If Gentner Drummond wins in this argument before the Supreme Court, and SCOTUS actually says, no, Gentner Drummond's right. Can't use those quote unquote tax dollars to pay for a religious school. Then what's going to happen to the 80% of the parents and families that use their Pell Grant to go to Oklahoma Wesleyan University? What's going to happen to ORU, John Brown University, Southern Naz University, Mid-American Naz University, Central Christian? What's going to happen to Azusa Pacific, Seattle Pacific, Taylor University, Westmont and Wheaton? What's going to happen to Spring Arbor College and Greenville College, Roberts Wesleyan College? What's going to happen? Because they all are essentially in the same mix as I was when I was president at Oklahoma Wesleyan University. Our students had the right to use their tax dollars to go to whatever college they wanted to go to. And if it was boldly and unapologetically Christian, then so be it. That's their choice. If Gentner Drummond prevails, if Linda Murphy gets her way, you won't be able to use that money to go to a Christian college any longer. Separation of church and state. And here's the thing. If you really think that expunging religion from the public square is going to be some sort of utopia, a kumbaya moment where we don't have to worry about religious indoctrination any longer, religious ideas, whatever indoctrination means in the minds of these people with these arguments. If you really think that purging Christianity from the public square is a good, stop and think about the principle of a vacuum. Vacuums are always filled. So if you take Christianity out of the public square, out of government, something else is going to rush in to fill it. I guarantee you. And the thing that rushes in to fill it will not be religiously neutral. It won't be. Can't be. Never is. Because even atheism is a religious philosophy. You want indoctrination? You'll have it. Take Christianity out, purge Christianity from the public square, from all government programs and institutions, public schools and everything else. Purge all of those public spaces and places and services of Christianity, and something else will fill the vacuum. If you're afraid of Sharia, creating a vacuum should terrify you. You're afraid of Satanism? Creating a vacuum should terrify you. You're afraid of some other worldview that competes against Christianity? Creating a vacuum by purging Christianity from the public square should terrify you. Think about these things. Recognize that when Gentner Drummond says he's arguing for the protection of your religious freedom because he wants to keep that wall separating church from state strong because it's good for your religious freedom. Folks, the ACLU has been saying that for decades. The ACLU has been parroting this stuff for decades. And my goodness, isn't it time that conservatives stop sounding like the ACLU? Maybe it would be better if conservatives sounded a little bit by the Heritage Foundation, the Heritage Foundation rather than the ACLU. Wouldn't it be better to have those that fancy themselves as our conservative leaders agreeing with Scalia and Thomas and Alito more so than Sotomayor? When your conservatives are parroting the left on the Supreme Court and disparaging the right, I mean, with conservatives like that, who needs liberals? I'm Dr. Everett Piper, and this is The Rebellion.